I want to talk about Africa. Africa has been known for the good reasons in history books. Historians believe that Africa was and still is the cradle of mankind. Homo erectus, they believe, migrated from Africa to the rest of the world. Africa is also known for vast resources. Africa is as well known for its vast cultures. Many also level opinions that Africa might be the center of the world. During the colonization period, the Western world migrated into Africa for its beauty and resources. The Africa we read about in history books is an Africa that attracts the world. A different Africa has been painted from the 20th century. The 20th century Africa has been a region full of civil wars, a region full of corruption, a region full of famine, a region where people lack access to clean water, a region where elections are rigged, a region experiencing untreatable and in some cases preventable diseases, and a region with a greater alliance to the West. In the 21st century, a different Africa has also been described. The primary characteristics of the 21st century Africa is a region marred with electoral malpractices, a region defined by massive corruption, and most importantly, a region of terrorism and internal conflicts. Over the years, the West has targeted Africa, African countries, and African leaders. To them, Africa must be democratic, and African leaders must uphold democracy at all costs. I refer to the case of Libya. In 2011, the United States and NATO accused the then Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi of harboring weapons of mass destruction. The consequence of this claim and this serious allegation was the capture and killing of Muammar Gaddafi. NATO led this delegation with a bid to promote democracy in Libya. As we speak today, Libya is still struggling to establish a functional government. Warlords are still fighting in Libya. Innocent civilians are still dying in Libya. Access to education, healthcare, and food is still a problem in Libya. Ask yourself this question with regard to Libya's context. Was the NATO declaration the NATO objective of making Libya a democracy true? To me, in my own perspective, I would argue that NATO's bid to democratize Libya and their subsequent killing of Muammar Gaddafi never saved the African country, but it ruined it. In DR Congo, war started in 1996. The same Western allies arrived in Congo with a bid to help the government fight rebels. I am sad to inform Africans and the world that at the time of making this video, DR Congo, people in DR Congo are still fighting despite the Western intervention. Recently, it was established that more than 6 million people have died in the DR Congo war alone. And just the same as Libya's case, the United States and other Western allies arrived in DR Congo with a bid to contain the situation. And what we see at the moment is that civilians in DR Congo are still under the threat of rebels. Children in DR Congo still lack access to education, food, healthcare, and clean water. Civilians in DR Congo still have no access to roads and electricity because of war. Ask yourself this question again. Was the Western intervention in DR Congo a help or a harm? Recently, in Uganda, on May 26, 2023, Al-Shabaab extremists attacked a camp manned by the Ugandan soldiers, UPDF. According to the Ugandan government, the militants killed 54 soldiers. However, contradictory reports claim that at least 137 soldiers died during the attack. Recently, 41 people, Ugandans, died from a militant school attack. Of these 41, 37 were students. 17 boys were burnt alive in their dormitory. 20 girls were hacked to death with machetes. Uganda is a country in Africa. It is among the East African countries. In the recent periods, Uganda has faced a serious threat, a serious blockade from the West, especially the United States, because of their controversial homosexuality bill. Ask yourself this question with regard to Uganda. Why is the United States and the West concerned so much about the internal affairs of the country, to an extent that their MPs passing an homosexuality bill angers the West? You will answer that question. Somalia is also a country in Africa. Somalia has been known for the good reasons. Most importantly, its strategic location to the across the Indian Ocean. Sorry. However, in the 20th and 21st century, the African country has been on the limelight for the bad reasons. Somalia ranks top among African countries where fighting is ongoing. Now, Somalia is home to the ISIS-connected Al-Shabaab. And these militants are out to agitate for Islamic rule in the country. I checked online and I established that Somalia ranks among the countries with the highest number of deaths from civil wars and let me say deaths related to extremist activities. As of June 9th, 2023, an Al-Shabaab attack killed 9 and wounded 10 in Somalia. On 21st June 2023, an Al-Shabaab attack killed 8. And remember, Somalia is among the countries in Africa with a high contingent of Western soldiers. Russia is currently providing military aid to Somalia. The United States is currently providing military training to Somalia army. With the intervention of two world powers, the United States and Russia, war still rages in Somalia. Again, ask yourself this question: is the Western presence in Somalia and the Russian intervention in Somalia a help or a harm? I take you to another country, Ethiopia. Ethiopia is also a country in Africa. It is known to history for the good reasons. Ethiopia is identified as, let me say, the cradle of mankind and the cradle of religion. Rastafarians believe that their king, emperor Haile Selassie, started the religion in Ethiopia before it later spread to the whole world. However, in the 20th and 21st century, Ethiopia has not been in the history books for the good reasons. Civil war continues to cripple Ethiopia's economy, and recently, in 2020, there was this much talked about Tigray war. This war, according to estimates that the Human Rights Watch shares with the United Nations, at least 600,000 people were killed. And this war lasted between 3rd November 2020 and 3rd November 2022. That is 2 years, with at least 600,000 deaths. As this war rages, the same United States, China, Iran, Turkey, and the UAE are in Ethiopia, not for the good reasons, not for the objective to help the citizens, but with the primary goal of accomplishing their interests. In 2008, the United States donated about 969 million US dollars to Ethiopia. In 2009, the US donated around 916 million US dollars to Ethiopia. In 2010, the US donated 513 million to Ethiopia, and much of these funds go to reduction of poverty and economic development. Recent intervention, Western intervention in the Ethiopian war has been to support the country militarily. Still ask this question in relation to Ethiopia. Does the West presence in the African country help or harm the economy? I don't dispute the fact that they provide aid, and I don't dispute the fact that they provide military assistance. But I dispute the fact that with their presence, war still rages on in Ethiopia. I go to another African country, Mali. Mali is a small country with a very rich history. In this video, I will not delve so much in the history of Mali, but I will center on recent developments in the African country. Remember, Mali is one of the many African countries where presidents have suffered a coup d'etat. Now, recently, estimated as of 26th May 2023, Malians called for the withdrawal of UN mission in the country. Malians believed that UN presence in the country was aiding rather than preventing or reducing war. And our good friend, the United States, has not stayed shy from creating strong ties with Mali despite the ongoing war. In fact, according to my records, in August 2020, US bilateral foreign assistance to Mali amounted to at least 130 million US dollars. In 2020, this amount increased to 135 million US dollars. With these funds, there is still unrest in Mali. Citizens are suffering. Innocent civilians struggle to access food, healthcare, and clean water. Power cuts are common. Now, at this point, ask yourself this question: can't the United States help Mali to avoid the ongoing unrest? I refer to my last country, which is not necessarily in Africa, but a very important reference point to this discussion: Iraq. When I talk about Iraq, historians will quickly refer to Saddam Hussein. Iraq has been in the history books mostly for the bad reasons. The world has had a very bad experience with Iraq. Between 1990 and 1991, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait with claims that Kuwait was selling oil at cheaper prices to sabotage Iraq's economy. Saddam also claimed that Kuwait intended to invade Iraq. These claims were, however, not justified, and later writings revealed that Saddam Hussein of Iraq attacked Kuwait for personal reasons. In fact, history notes that Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait to solidify his grip of the Middle East. He also wanted to annex Kuwait. Now, Saddam's decision to attack Kuwait, as usual, gained the attention of the United States and the United Nations. The United States, through the United Nations, invaded Iraq. That was on 20th August 1991. The decision was made to save Kuwait from Iraq's grip. That was the first instance when the United States invaded Iraq militarily. In 2003, it was in 2003, 19th March 2003, the United States led a coalition of partners to invade Iraq for the second time. And this time, this invasion lasted from 19th March 2003 to 1st May 2003, where 130,000 American soldiers invaded Iraq. I am not concerned about the number of soldiers. I am not concerned about the number of deaths. But I am concerned about the justification of United States invasion of Iraq. According to the United Nations Security Council mandates, the United States 2003 invasion of Iraq was limited to, let me say, saving the liberation of Kuwait. sorry, that was in the 1991 case. In 2003, many felt that the United States overstepped its role in maintaining peace. Many Americans and many people across the world believed that the United States acted out of personal reasons to protect its interests in Iraq. In fact, according to a CBS poll, 64% of Americans felt that the Iraq case needed to follow a more diplomatic path. However, contrary to what the Americans felt, the United States government captured Saddam Hussein, tried him, and handed him a death sentence by hanging. Sadly, on December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein was executed by hanging, which Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch stated that the trial was unfair and flawed. In all my discussions and my references to specific African countries, we see some similarity. We see a trend. In all these cases, Africa has attracted the attention of the West in the 20th and 21st century for the wrong reasons. The United States, to be specific, has always come to Africa with the principle of introducing and stamping democracy. The United States has always come to Africa to teach African countries and African governments how to implement democracy. To them, most African countries are under authoritarian rule. They are coming to Africa, and their interventions in Africa are set to ensure the effectiveness of democracy. As a historian, as a scholar, although when ranked, I will be ranked least or at the lowest in the list of scholars. I believe the United States and the West is responsible for the current chaos in African countries. Africans and Africa needs to wake up. Africa needs to realize its potential. Africa needs to remember that its defining factors of the 20th and 21st century are not good. Africa should reverse and revert its course back to the history, not of the 20th and 21st century, but to the defining factors of the 19th century going backwards. Africa and African governments should realize that the West must not come to teach them on how to implement democracy. They should remember that even the West, in their purported effective frameworks of democracy, experiences significant flaws. I have a message for Africa. I think Africa needs to wake up. Foreign governments come to us. They show love to us. But to fulfill their interests. Foreign governments are willing, very ready, to provide foreign aid, but they are adamant to solve the warring issues that we have as Africa. The list of countries fighting in Africa is endless. The number of deaths from these fights is unimaginable. Africa is the center of suffering. Talk about poverty, Africa. Talk about lack of electricity, Africa. Talk about poor health care, Africa. Talk about corruption, Africa. Talk about rape, Africa. Every vice that you might name, the first reference point is always Africa. And I believe this comes because of the over-reliance of African countries to the Western world. Africa and African leaders need to learn to do it their own way. They need to realize their own potentials without relying on the West. And in this way, Africa will demand respect from the West. That is my message to Africa. The United States is here. China is here. Russia is here. Turkey is here. France is here. All fighting for African resources. And I tend to believe, and I tend to argue, and I will strongly claim that the current wars in African countries are imported. These are wars that foreign countries like the United States and Russia bring to African countries to divert attention and exploit their resources. I ask myself a question. Why are these countries proceeding with their resource exploitations in Africa yet people are fighting and dying in these countries. If African leaders are able to answer this question, then they shall have realized their potential. Last message to Africa: wake up.